Hi everyone, my name is Francine and I'm the Executive Director of Sistema B Brasil, a country partner of B Lab. It's a great pleasure to have such great people from all over the place, from different roles that you have in the B movement. So welcome to be here. It's an honor. And today we are here to discuss what's behind the B. What the B stands for in the different, you know that we are talking more than a certification, we are a global movement. So I would like to ask each one of you to introduce yourself and what's your role? What's your part in the B?
So hello everyone, I'm Susmita from the Standards Management team at B Lab. And so essentially our team is responsible for the standards for B Corp certification, which means that we are responsible for defining what do companies need to do in order to be certified as a B Corp. And so our team essentially leads on codifying what good business and what good practices look like. Now, in terms of the big picture and what role do we play in the movement, the standards, I think, are at the heart of the credibility of our movement, because they help create like a vision for the world that we want to achieve. And they also create a mechanism for holding companies accountable to the standards. And the other thing that I'd like to mention is also that the work that we do is inherently complex and involves a lot of nuance, because we engage with lots of different experts and stakeholders, and we also identify areas of agreement and disagreement. And where there are disagreements, we try to carve out a path forward in the most thoughtful manner possible.
Wow, it's a huge work. And Jared, what about you?
Well, I know I'm here today in my capacity as a founding steward, which means that I financially support this movement, and I try to use all my influence and relationships to raise awareness of it. But I'm also a business owner within the movement. I'm involved with about 5 different benefit corporations that span hotels, real estate development, banking, and a few others. And then I'm involved with growing the movement directly through Florida for Good here in the state of Florida, and through B Tourism globally in the travel and tourism industry. So I'm just a major fan of the movement and feel very lucky to be a part of it. So thank you for having me today.
So important to have your support, Jared, and we can see the passion. Andrea, and what about you?
Hi, everyone. My name is Andrea, and I am the Sistema B regional lead. And what the regional lead does on the certification and verification team is manage the projections, expectations, and ratings in that region, and also facilitating between global partners, companies, and also the team itself. And then aside from that, I also do work on certifying companies in the region, mostly the larger companies, medium-sized companies, 250 to 1,000 employees. And I work with those companies to reach certification and recertification.
Amazing. Nathan?
Yeah, so Nathan Stuck, Director of Corporate Culture and Strategic Impact at Advictorium Solutions. So we're B Corp out of Georgia. It's like, look at this, with the Southern United States are represented, Jared. But yeah, I also founded and run B Local Georgia. I teach a class on B Corps at the University of Georgia, where our students work on certifying and helping companies certify. And then I'm also the B Local Engagement Chair for B Academics. So much like Jared, just kind of a big fan of the movement and have gotten a lot from being involved in the movement, and just kind of a passionate believer in business being a force for good and creating jobs that people actually enjoy getting out of bed on Monday for.
Definitely, and a lot of roles. And Tom?
Hi everyone, nice to meet you. I'm Tom. I'm the co-founder and CEO of the B Corp creative agency called Nice and Serious, based in sunny London. So we've been going for about 13 years now, and we exists to make creative work the world needs. So we work with international brands and charities to communicate the social environmental impact they're having in sort of creative ways. And proud to say we were part of the team that designed the nice designs and creative that's currently on your background. So nice to see that in the world.
Oh, thank you. And definitely a huge thanks from the movement, because we love it. It's a great campaign. Let's start. We know that we are seeking here for different changes within the movement. We are talking about the way to change the way the companies operate. We need to do a culture change the narrative and tone. Definitely the marketing piece, the communication piece is super relevant here, and we need to change the way the capitalism is structured. But we know that one of the most important part of our work is related to the certification. So maybe I would like to invite maybe Susamita and Andrea to tell us, why are the performance standards so important to make sure that the private sector has a reliable guide to behave in the most sustainable way? Why was that?
Yeah, I can share my thoughts and invite Andrea also to add. So firstly, I think that performance standards help us in establishing and measuring and then assuring a certain level of sustainability performance for companies, and not just for companies, also for like other stakeholders, like their customers, their employees, suppliers, and so many more. And specifically, I think the importance of performance standards is that they are all about action, like concrete actions, which can be then verified. And so besides this, they also serve as an educational tool, because they inform companies on what are the most impactful actions that they can be taking. And then this can help companies in prioritizing the actions that they could be taking to achieve the outcomes aligned with like the vision of our certification. And then this also helps in setting an ambition and making progress towards it through the path of continuous improvement.
Yeah, thanks, Susmita. And I just want to add that one of the great things about the impact assessment is using it as a self-measuring tool, not just towards the path of certification, but you can use it to measure your impact. Maybe every year you can take the assessment, every 3 years through the certification. So that's one of the great ways I see companies find improvements or best practices that they are currently doing. And in terms of performance standards, I feel like the versions change, and that's just to encourage companies to keep improving in those areas, in the 5 areas that the assessment captures, and also the expectation that they want to improve. And as the standards become more rigorous, it challenges companies to also evolve with the standards, which is really important.
Definitely, and from a country partner standpoint of view, that I related a lot with different companies here in Brazil, they said a lot that the standards are a North Star. It's a real and very good guidance for how to improve, how to become a company that the world needs. And I would love to hear the B Corp leaders that we have here. How was the process? You've been through the certification. How was that? How was to engage the different stakeholders? Because we know it's a long process, a difficult one, tough one. Would love to listen your experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most fun part of working with companies on certification, that, you know, watching my students work with them, is that like aha moment as they start to realize the things that they say they care about, and you know, how do we quantify these? You know, I mean, it was the biggest tool for us when we first went through this process, and I was a student, and then I went to work for Advic, and watching us turn the BIA into KPIs for our company. And I think a lot of companies now, we've created those beekeeper roles in some form or another, strategic impact, culture, whatever you want to call it, that, that just as important to the business as, year over year sales growth and revenue and all those traditional KPIs that businesses have, having targets around, carbon footprint reduction and diversity inclusion numbers and retention numbers, employee engagement, community involvement, watching some of these companies who have these big community initiatives and they're like, I don't know, we don't really track it, we just do it. And helping them put frameworks around how you track these things and how you set up systems and processes to track what really matters to your business and to the values of your business. And that, that BIA, going through that process, I think is such a valuable exercise. And we say we care about these things and now we quantify it. And sometimes the numbers come out and you're like, I guess we didn't care about this as much as we thought we did. And it gives you something to shoot for and a target and a way to not decide, but to determine whether or not you're actually living your values. And then I think there's a whole marketing alignment piece that comes after that of, are we doing what we're telling the world we're doing, what we're telling our employees that we stand for, what we're telling our customers we believe in. So I think that's the value from a user perspective. That's been what has taken us from good company to great company.
Great. The measurement piece of it, it's super important. Tom, what's your vision?
I'm not going to lie, it was a challenge. I work, run a relatively small business. There's just sort of 20 people in our team. And we first attempted to get certified in 2015. And I think we went in quite arrogantly, almost thinking, actually we're an ethical business. We do this really well. We do all of these initiatives. But I think it was a really important awakening, and it was quite humbling to go through the process, because we realized actually we thought we were great in all of these areas, but what it turned out is that we had a few focus areas as a business that we were doing quite well on, but it sort of opened our eyes to a much more sort of holistic sense of the impact we have as a business, the fact that as a business we operate in this ecosystem that spans community, governance, environment, and that we had a lot to learn. So we failed quite badly, I think, on the first time we tried, but we sort of regrouped, our team grew, we realized we had a lot of processes to put in place to kind of hold ourselves to account, and then finally we tried again in 2020, and I really had to align the senior leadership team. I signed clear roles and responsibilities. It was coming from the top this time. I said, look, we have to get this. We've got 6 months. We're going to get this over the line. Let me know what I need to change, what I need to implement to make sure we can do this. And as a team, we got it over the line the second time. And it was a journey. It was humbling, but it was incredibly important, and I'm glad we went through it, because we just didn't have that framework. We were looking at our impact, I think, in silos as opposed to the systemic impact we have as a business. So it was tiring, but it was incredibly worthwhile.
Yeah, this is super relevant, because sometimes when the companies start the process, they think that it takes getting the B, it's like the end point, but we all know that this is the start point of a long journey, a really long journey. And we know that the companies had to recertify every three years, right? So I'd like you to explain, we are talking about why it's important, how hard it is, but how does it work, both the certification process and the recertification process? Andrea, can you explain a bit?
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to try and quickly explain it. So yeah, the certification process can be divided into certification for new companies and also the recertification every 3 years. Very slightly, but it's very similar. So once the company submits their assessment, it goes into the evaluation queue. So in the evaluation queue, we have on the team evaluation analysts that work with that company to review any scope, size, complex structure before the company is actually assigned. And once a company is ready, all the cases are logged internally, the company moves into the verification queue. So in the verification queue, global partners are always in communication with the companies. As a regional lead, I work with the companies in reviewing company readiness, if they've been, if the company has uploaded the required documentation, anything that is necessary for once they're assigned. Once a company is ready, I put it on a list of ready companies that the verification analysts can now assign themselves. So right now we just started the self-assignment system, which is really innovative in a way. Previously, I was the one assigning these companies. So I think that also promotes a lot of autonomy within the team and ownership culture. So then once the company is assigned by the analyst, they start the verification process. And I think this is where it's very familiar for people who have gone through the certification process, working with the company to upload documentation, to have the review call with the company to verify. The goal is to verify 100% of the assessment. So there might be multiple rounds. There might be some disclosure questions that maybe Susmita is familiar with, also in communication with the global partners, if there's any process related question. So a lot of hands are always in the this part, the verification process. So once we reach 100% of verification, then the company has a quick like assessment check by someone else on the team, and that's when the score is finalized. If the score is above 80, then we go into post verification, where the company signs the B Corp agreement. If there are any pending cases, any transparent disclosure, that's where that gets taken care of. And then finally, after a lot of work, the company certifies as a B Corp. And then the recertification process, just real quick, I think the biggest difference is that the analyst that is working with the recertification has a previous assessment or assessments that they do compare changes with. So there is like this part where you are reviewing like how did the company score last time and like how have they improved this time around. So that's the biggest difference, but the steps and the milestones are relatively very similar.
Yeah, and I don't know if you have the numbers, but I can see from my experience that in general, when the company recertify, in general, most of them recertify with a higher score. So it shows that they are improving. It's a real, it's a journey actually. And wow, we can see how hard it is. And Jared, I know that you are in some boards, part of some B Corp board meetings. What is the relevance of the top leadership and the boards in this process? How can we engage them? Is it hard or not? and what are their role during the process when they decided to go?
So my observation has been that the companies can get involved in this process either top down or bottom up, right? I don't think it's always one way in which it goes, but ultimately the board and ownership need to be on board with this process in order for it to work properly. You can be doing some really good things as a company, but again, one of the big differentiators here is that B Corps aren't companies that just do a few things good here or there. It's holistic, and holistic means it needs to be bought into at every level of the organization. And one of the good examples of this that I learned going through the BIA was like when we were looking at even diversity within the company. A lot of companies throw out a statistic that's company-wide, but the real question is, but how is it measured at the different levels within the organization? Ownership, board, senior management, frontline employees. It's a very different view when you look at it that way than holistic. So the boards need to be involved and ownership needs to be involved with the process. It doesn't mean you can't have other employees help fill out the BIA and do a lot of the work of gathering the data behind what's being done, but it needs to be fully supported And that's also because there's a legal commitment, as we know, behind this. It's not just something that you say, oh, it's good for us this year, maybe next year we won't do it. I mean, there's an actual legal commitment, and that's the whole reason that the Benefit Corporation, and I know it has some different names in other parts of the world, but at least in the United States, the Benefit Corporation is that legal commitment to positive impact, and it needs to be verified, which is where the certification comes in, or some other measurement mechanism. So I think it's very good that it is, but boards ultimately do need to be involved in the process. And I think that the boards that have that, the more involved they get into it, the more they appreciate it, because they start to understand why this is a contributor to long-term value within the organization. It's not just something that they hear, but as they see the questions behind the impact assessment and they really think those through, they start to feel how this makes your company a better company.
For sure. Yeah, go on, Susamita, please.
One more thought I can add here is that I think engaging the top management is also essential from creating the sustainability of all the actions that you're taking, because I think by engaging the top management, you can really drive that culture change, which will then be one of the most important components in ensuring that whatever it is that you're doing within your B impact assessment keeps on happening forever. For the life of the company. So that's why it's important as well to engage them.
Yeah, definitely. And we can see that going through this process, we need a lot of engagement. We need to engage different stakeholders, right? Would love to hear Tom and Nathan, how was the process for you? How do you deal with the engagement piece of the certification? And being a B Corp and engaging other B Corps.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's been the valuable process. And just to touch on what Jared just said too, you know, I've heard our CEO refer to our B Corp certification as guardrails for corporate decision making. You know, and just to give that perspective of a fast growing company, we started the process in 2016 with 8 employees. We certified in 2018 with probably 25 to 30. We recertified in 2021 with probably 85, and we're going to hit 200 by the end of June. So, you know, being able to, as you're scaling, to make decisions with this in the back of your mind, or probably the front of your mind, that we have committed to these things, we stand for these things. I think it has been super valuable for us as we've scaled to keep us kind of, I make the analogy all the time, when a boat takes on water, you're going to throw over some of the heavier stuff overboard. And I feel like a lot of this is heavier stuff when you're trying to grow a business and bring in clients and all those things and hire people. But we've never, I think, having that certification kept us from throwing any of this overboard. So as far as the engagement piece, you know, internally, stakeholder engagement is probably something we struggled with at the beginning because it was very top down. So our CEO and our CFO knew what we were doing. I was involved as a student and now as a new employee. And we rolled it out and we announced it and we expected everybody to celebrate with us, and nobody really knew what we were talking about. So, you know, it's something I work with when I work with new companies. It's like, hey, as you're going through the process, involve your team and get them excited. You know, do a company lunch and learn, do a whatever. If you do a company coffee chat once a month, you know, have the subject be, here's what we're working on. Here's why it matters. Here's why it's important to you. Here's why it's important to the company, and start getting them excited about it. And then as you get out into the community, I think it's important as we grow this movement. You know, I do talks with students. I do talks that are more C-suite focused. I do talks with marketing focus groups, operations focus groups, and help them to understand the different pieces of the business and how this plugs in. Because like Jared said, it can come from if you get the right employee champion, you can change the mind of the executive team to get on board and do this. And then vice versa, if you get the right executive team bought in, you can then trickle that down into excitement and into let's do this. And it's going to be a team effort like Tom talked about. And Tom, that's my segue right into you and your experience.
Amazing segue, Nathan. Thank you very much. I guess from a like an engagement perspective, I think we've got two lenses. We've got our colleagues and we've got our kind of clients. So I think with colleagues, as sort of, you know, as Nathan pointed out, that initial phase, it's a little bit like, what is it? I don't really know about it. I haven't heard about it. But actually, I think what we've found is, from a cultural perspective, the narrative shifts from I am in the business for the benefit of the owner and shareholders, so like me, to us, as in the business is clearly demonstrating a commitment to us as a team. And I think that didn't necessarily happen overnight, but we kind of found that it involved us communicating on a regular basis when decisions were made, and anchoring those decisions back to the B Corp certification process to say, we have implemented this new policy on, I don't know, on team development because it's part of our commitment to B Corp certification. So we just kept on linking decisions back to the certification so that people could really see what we were doing, but also the fact it was part of this B Corp movement. So I think that's really helped. It's helped engender a feeling of trust, and the fact that we all belong, and that as business owners we are really in it for the wider team as well. And I guess from a client perspective, for us, it's really been a shorthand, the B Corp certification, to say that we mean business from an ethical perspective, from an ethical standpoint in some respects, because I think partly the fault of my own industry is that there is a lot of distrust around environmental and sort of social commitments. It's very easy to say like, hey, we're committed to the environment, and it's like, yeah, what does that mean? You know, our industry, the creative industry, is very good at like writing kind of statements and commitments that it's quite hard to pin down, and that was a challenge for us over time. So the fact that we are B Corp certified, we explain to our clients, means that we meet the highest environmental and social standards, and that's verified by a third party. And that for us provides a real differentiator to show that we're aligned with what the client stands for too. And for us, that's been invaluable from a business development perspective, and also just building a relationship and being seen more as a partner rather than just a supplier, one of many in some respects. So it's been incredibly valuable.
And Tom, I'm just glad you touched on that too, because there is an ROI element. I think sometimes B Corps are afraid to talk about in terms of breaking through that greenwashing clutter. A good marketing team can make a company seem like the greatest organization in the world. I know Jared has strong feelings about this as well, but I think that to me is the beauty of the B, is that just kind of, this is our branding bundle. This is everything we stand for, in a way that just jumps through all the other marketing noise that's out there of empty commitments or vague commitments, and commitments to sometimes nothing. Yeah,
definitely. And Jared, you touch a very important thing. It's about the stakeholder governance that we all care about. And here, when I listen what both Nathan and Tom are saying, we're talking about people, the relevance of a leader, independently if it's in the top or employee. And for me, this is about culture. Can governance influence culture?
I mean, it definitely can. I think it's a combination of governance and adopting the right type of framework. And so my own firsthand experience when I started the process, there's so much that even for the businesses that want to do business the right way, they don't necessarily know how, unless they had been very lucky and come up around some amazing mentors in the process. The framework that is provided by the BIA and by B Corps and B Lab in general is one that not only makes you a better business, but it does build a culture towards positive impact, towards doing good, towards wanting the world to be better as a result of our actions, not worse. And so, the culture of our movement is inclusive, regenerative, equitable, or those are the principles, let's just say, behind it, that contribute to a culture that feeds those, right? The culture of traditional business is exploitive, extractive, make as much money as possible for shareholders, and it isn't stakeholder oriented. Now, that's not true of all of them. There are definitely businesses out there, even that are not B Corps, that are doing business well. What B Corp brings into it is it brings the credibility behind saying that we're doing business well. It's verified. It's not just me saying, hey, look at all the good we're doing, trust me. It's a third party has verified this and has looked to see that I'm doing what I'm saying I'm claiming to be doing. So it does build a new culture. It gives you something to rally behind, to get your employees excited about. It's been very successful in my own businesses as a result of it. And employees seek us out. They want to work with us as a result. They want to be part of that winning culture not being maximized profits, but being best for the world, right? And that's been a big, that was one of the campaigns done by B Lab originally, was to be the best in the world, you have to be the best for the world. Well, that's a culture. And very much the B Corp movement promotes that and helps you through the framework that they provide for free, by the way, which is, I just find fascinating. It's like, you don't have to pay anything to do this or to learn about this. It's only if you become certified that there's a fee.
Great. I see, Susamita, that you are agreeing. Do you have an example, you or maybe Andrea, of a company that you could see this culture thing happening?
Not a company specifically, but I think what Jared said really resonated. Just because I think for me, the goal of the B Corp certification and ultimately the movement is to create this community of like-minded companies that are setting the standard. And then within that community, B Corps are also able to hold each other accountable to the evolving standards. So that itself is setting the standards and holding people accountable for what they're saying they're doing, what kind of practices, what kind of improvements they're working on. And I think that's really what is going to change the economic system eventually and gradually.
Yeah, and the thing that really resonated with me, what Jared said, is about like the companies having the intent to want to do something good, but not necessarily always having the framework. And then the B impact assessment provides that framework completely educationally and for free, so that companies can start using it and understand the improvements that they could be making. So just that, I think that there's something super powerful about that educational value of the tool, so regardless of whether they want to become a B Corp or not, just like using that tool and understanding what they could be doing, what they could be prioritizing, I think that's something super powerful about it.
Super. And we discussed a little bit about the greenwashing part, and we know that there's we are super concerned about it, but communication can be used for greenwashing, but it can also be used to change the narrative, to change the way business and people see business in the world and the role they play. So Tom, I would love to listen to you. How do you think communications can change the world? And if it can, or at least support it.
Yeah, I think if I didn't believe that, I wouldn't have set up the agency that I run. So yeah, I mean, look, communications has a vital and probably overlooked role over the last decade in creating the world that we want to see. Obviously, it's played a fundamental role in slowing down a lot of the movements as well. I think people have used communications in a way to stagnate the movement and to create doubt. But equally, I think what we need to realize is there are some incredibly important levers that the advertising and communications industries use to drive behavior change. So what we need to do is to use those same techniques, but to drive people towards positive behaviors to create the world that we want to see. And, I think what's wonderful about B Corps and where this whole campaign idea came from, the Behind the B, was that the power that we have with B Corps is to open the door. And to say, challenge the people that are greenwashing to say, okay, guys, open your door, be transparent, show us what you actually mean. Whereas with B Corps, I'm like, come on in any day of the week. Look at our governing documents, look at our processes, look at our commitments, because we're not scared. We've been through that BIA process. Of course, like every business, we know that things need to change, things need to constantly improve. But that's what's different about B Corps. We are authentic, we're transparent, and I think what this whole Behind the B campaign is encouraging us to do is to become more confident and open in sharing all of the wonderful stories and all the wonderful people that sit behind B Corps that make us different, because it's only then that I think people will start to associate on a much broader level the B with better, what a better world looks like. So yeah.
Definitely. And we know that being a B Corp, it's a journey. We are not perfect. No, any company in the world is perfect. And if I'm not wrong, you can correct, there's no company with the 200 points that reached that level of standards. So what I was thinking about, we are talking about how good it is, but what are the challenges that you see behind the B? As both as a movement or as a company, or you guys, Susamita and Andrea, that are workers from this movement. What are the main challenges that you see in your roles?
I'm happy to chime in, or
I was leaving
wants to take it first.
I was leaving an awkward pause for you there, Jared, to jump in.
Oh, thank you. I think that the largest concerns that I have would be misaligned incentives in society. Is that what we understand in this community will help move society in the right direction. It's great for us to do it, on a company by company basis, and that's what we do in this movement. But in the larger picture, we're evidence and proof that you can operate this way, be profitable, and cause less harm in the process. Ideally, drive positive impact, but that is actually really hard to do. Most companies absolutely wreak havoc out there, traditional companies. And so we're trying to show that, look, companies in all these industries, in all these parts, all these countries, I think 78 countries, B Corps are in right now, and can do this. It's not isolated to small or large, like this is possible, this is doable. And so we need to get all of society on board, and we need incentives in all of society to get on board. And so I think the biggest challenges of this is that it comes back to the systems approach, which I think eventually we'll probably be talking about, is for the necessary change to happen, we need systems change. We don't want the same results occurring and same outcomes occurring that have happened over the last few hundred years. A few good businesses will never change things by themselves, but what they can be is a catalyst for larger change. And I think that's what the B Corp movement is about. It's about showing that we currently have 4,700 businesses doing some really good work out there and growing, and we are going to try to get the global economy to pay attention to what's happening and get on board, and then try to align society's policies and incentives in line with what we understand are the best practices out there. And then we can get better outcomes that are more favorable, reduce inequality, reduce inequities, give us better environment, helps us drive towards all of the goals that create more of a shared and durable prosperity.
On the standards side, Francine, what I'd say is that standards, like the process of creating standards, is inherently complex and involves a lot of nuance. And particularly our standards are it's a global certification standard, which applies to every single company. So a company which is 0 workers or a company which is 1,000 employees, it applies to them. It applies to companies in every region of the world. It applies to companies in every sector. So it's a really huge sort of mandate, to have standards that can work for each and every company in the world. And I think that as part of this process of creating standards of this nature, there's a lot of varying needs and engagement with different experts and stakeholders. And there are differing perspectives on topics that we normally work on. And so listening to all of it and also applying our own knowledge on those things and trying to carve out a path forward so that it works for everyone and still continues to align us all towards that vision of an equitable, regenerative economic system for everyone. I think that is what I personally find challenging, but also very exciting at the same time.
Yeah, and just to add to what Susmita said, I think I've seen what the standards management team has been working on recently, just to improve performance requirements. And that does take a lot of time, a lot of effort. And as like sometimes it feels like we're getting to to a solution and then things change all over again. And things like are always evolving. So just making sure that we keep up with what society.
Just echoing what Andrea said, I think that like another aspect of our standards is that just like we expect companies to continuously improve, continuous improvement is also at one of the like core tenets of our standards. And just like the world keeps changing and evolving, our standards also need to keep on evolving. And one of the examples of such evolution that Andrea already shared is like we are undertaking this review of our performance requirements, within which we are essentially looking at whether the definition of leadership itself has changed in the past 15 years since the inception of our certification. And if so, then how should our standards reflect that? And so within this, we are looking at potentially specific requirements on a few key global issues, such as justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, climate action, fair wages, and so much more, all with the intention of continuing to create standards which are impactful, clear, and responsive to the things that we hear from our stakeholders. So again, a process of constant evolution is inherently challenging, but also very engaging and exciting to work on.
Sure. Tom?
Yeah, I mean, I think in a way I agree with everything that's been said. I think in a way what I'm quite interested in as well is I think one of the biggest challenges is perhaps a lack of role models in the business world. And I think going back to when I set up, I was however old I was at the time, 23 or something like that. There was a massive void of progressive leadership. I think one of the problems is we uphold as a society, these people who have amassed vast wealth and all that surrounds that. And actually what we need more people like Jared, people who have been successful business people, but have managed to do that in a way that's ethical. And I think the more role models we can get in society, and especially more female role models too, business leaders, I think that will help shape it. Because at the moment, if you want to set up a tech business, you just look to the billionaires, whereas actually we need to redefine what success looks like as a business leader and celebrate that, so that becomes the desirable decision as an entrepreneur, and you can bake that in at the start rather than creating your business, scaling, and then having to retrofit it at the end, if that makes sense. So yeah, the more business leaders we can get and put on pedestals and get them out in front of people, the more we can inspire the next generation of entrepreneurs to try and mimic those more sustainable models like B Corp. So yeah.
Sure. We can say that the challenges is the size of our dream. So if you want to create a new economic system that makes sense for everyone and healthy for the planet, we need to deal with all those challenges. But and we are really grateful for everything that you are all doing and saying and playing the roles that you are playing. It's so important to have people like Jared that is supporting the movement. All the work is behind the B, and the B leaders that actually is getting and being our role models as B Corps and B leaders. So, and we can see that there's a lot of passion here. Do you believe that together we can reach our vision towards a more inclusive, equitable, and sustainable economic system?
Sure, absolutely. I absolutely think that we can reach our vision. And I think that at the core of that belief and conviction is that our certification and our movement is firstly centered on companies and businesses. And businesses have such a lot of influence in society. They affect so many people. They impact their value chains, their employees, the environment. So business as a player has so much potential. And I think, unfortunately, over the past few decades, the conventional model of business has been to maximize profit without necessarily paying regard to the cost to other stakeholders. And I think that our certification is trying to address that and try to redefine what is the purpose of business and what should leadership look like. And by working on these tenets, I essentially think that the certification and our movement has the potential to truly create ripples in the whole system. So by certifying certain companies, create ripples with regards to the value chains that they work in, with regards to their decisions that their employees and their customers can make, and so much more. So that's how I think that we can achieve our vision.
Super. Tom?
Yeah, I can quickly jump in. I believe we can get there. But I also believe I don't think we should approach this naively. This is going to be a battle. A battle is probably an aggressive metaphor. It's not so much a battle. It's going to be an uphill struggle. I think there's so much progress we need to make. So, in the UK, there are, I think, 600 B Corps. That's out of 6 million businesses. So that we are 0.0001% of the business population. So as B Corps, we're going to have to speak loudly, really loudly, to have this heard. And we've got to get a whole lot of people on that journey with us. I think the sort of social political research is you need about 3% of a population to create a movement. That's still a long way to go. We're way off that. So I think it's going to be uphill. But, the more people we get on board, the louder that we are as a movement, the more likely we'll get to that point. So I think there's a big, long journey, but I'm kind of up for it.
Jared?
I definitely think we can, and I think we will change the economic system. I don't know how long it will take for that to happen. I know there will be a lot of difficult times through that process, because anytime you change the status quo, there's pushback by those that are enjoy the status quo, or those that don't have the time to even engage in that change. Most people that are negatively impacted by the current environment don't have any time to even read about this stuff and work towards this. And that's why it's important that we get businesses to drive towards a better future. But I think that we will get there eventually, and we have to, because what we're trying to address with business impacts all of us. Like the negative impacts caused by business ultimately circle back and hurt those same people that are part of those, what I'm gonna call bad businesses. The very fact that we signed a Declaration of Interdependence to be part of this movement really sets it out, that we recognize that we're part of a large system. What we do impacts others, what they do impacts us. And that's just kind of how it is. So the changes that we're proposing to make are better for all. So, if people understood that and really understood that, this would be a change overnight. The problem is not everyone understands that. And so they don't know to get behind this, but it's just an eventuality, I think. And the question is just, how long is it going to take to get there? What sort of excitement can we generate to speed up the process? But I can tell by everyone on this call and those that are part of the movement that there's a lot of people that are committed to making that happen quickly. So I'm excited about it.
Yeah. So I think for me personally, I do hope that we can achieve this. And something that it has been very surprising to me in the pandemic is that at the beginning of 2020, we had an increase in submissions for the B Corp certification. So I feel like that was very, I think for me, inspiring, that people, I think there was a shift that people were starting to feel in the pandemic. Maybe priorities were changing, maybe people were realizing, what is really important right now in the midst of a pandemic. And I think we're just gonna keep moving forward and moving up with the number of B Corps that get certified, but also people who are interested in the certification. And as the community grows as well, I think that that's just going to add fuel to the fire. And yeah, I think to answer the question of why am I here, I think I want to make sure that the B Corp certification remains inclusive and accessible to everyone, and be able to not only hold companies accountable, but also hold ourselves accountable to this movement.
Yeah, and to finish, I'm also a super believer, because I believe that we are already doing the change. So all the things that we listen today brings us a lot of hope, and not just because the planet we don't have time anymore, but I do believe that when there's a shift in generations, this change will be massive, and everyone. I don't believe we are still aware of the huge change that it's to come. So yeah, it's not just a dream. We are doing it right now. So we explore different point of views, different things, and a lot of behind the B here. So thank you a lot for everyone to be here, and thank you for your passion, for your work, for your dedication to build this movement.